if Donald Trump is elected president, can you work with him? And the second part is, if Hillary Clinton is elected, can you work with her?
Yes, my name is Danny Tarkanian. Yes, I would be supporting Donald Trump with most of his policies. With respect to Hillary Clinton, you got to work with people, so you can't say, no, you're not going to. I doubt there's going to be too many positions that she takes or directions that she takes that I'm going to support, but I'm going to advocate the Republican principles, the conservative principles as much as I can to get through as much of the laws that follow those principles as best as I can, having somebody who doesn't agree with me as Hillary would.
Life in general, and especially government, is all about working with people you don't get along with and trying to find common ground. We've done that here in Nevada. Washington has a real problem with that. I'm a pragmatic, common sense leader. I've proven that over the last 6 years in the state Senate. I will take that same leadership to Washington. I will work with whoever I have to make sure this country moves forward in the right direction.
The transgender debate is the latest example of what many consider the federal overreach into our states' rights. This month's sequel is Star Wars, where by the force of his pen, Obama has again bypassed Congress to get his way. As a Nevada citizen, what is your opinion of this, and if elected to Congress, what would you do to address this?
Well, there's two parts to that. The first part is Obama's continual overreach of his executive powers, and you've seen that with the Health Care Act and everything else. This is one of the most serious problems our country's facing. We need to put a stop to it. Even a Republican president, if it's Donald Trump, has to go back to following the Constitution and not usurping the congressional powers and doing what they feel is right. Bigger question, the most passionate question, is this transgender bill, which I think is almost incredible that anyone can even think this is right. It isn't a discrimination issue. It's a safety and decency issue. I've got 3 young children. I don't want anybody who does not, 3 young daughters that aren't girls that are going to the bathroom with the girls. You know, $25 million of this new tax increase that we paid for here in Nevada went to a bill called the Anti-Bullying Statute, which requires kids in the school, in the Nevada school system, to have transgenders go into, have boys feel like they're girls go into girls' bathrooms. It's completely wrong. It shouldn't happen. There shouldn't be a debate on it. And if Republicans can't win this debate, we're never going to win a debate.
The Veterans Administration has a great track record in research and technology, but has serious problems in the administration of care for their vets. This is a serious federal issue that has to be addressed. Do you see a fix for this decades-long problem? And we'll begin with Senator Robinson.
It is a travesty what's going on with the Veterans Administration. Senator Heller, to his credit, has been leading the effort to reform the VA in Washington. And I would certainly, if I'm lucky enough to be elected, work with him to continue to reform that organization. But one of the things that's been brought up, and which I support, is making sure every veteran has a card that they can use at any hospital in this country to get health care. Because until we get the VA fixed, we cannot continue to let down the men and women who fought for our country and who saved our country. We've got to give them the best health care available in this country.
I'm the only candidate in CD3 that's got the endorsements of the 2 largest veterans organizations after they had all these interviews. They endorsed me because they know my concern and care for the veterans, like all of us should have, to put their lives on the line to protect us and give us the freedoms and liberties here. The answer to this problem is we need to create more accessibility and competition, which will give the veterans an opportunity to decide where they want to go and get their treatment, whether it's in the VA hospital or it's in a private hospital. Everything in the private sector, you create more competition, you get a better product at a lower cost.
Thank you. The national debt is more than $19 trillion. It exceeds our gross domestic product. That's more than $160,000 per taxpayer total. The top 5 budget items are Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and the military, in that order. If you are elected, how do you plan to curtail these expenses or other expenses?
We have to get our debt under control. We cannot leave this growing debt. It's 19 trillion and 200 and some billion and growing every second. It'll be to $20 trillion soon. I would not advocate cutting the military spending. This president has cut the military time and time again. Currently we have, or we're on track to have, the smallest army since World War II, the smallest Navy since World War I, and the smallest Air Force ever. That's something that you may have heard from Marco Rubio. He talked about it throughout his campaign. Now, of course, we can be smart about how we spend money on defense and national security, but if there is one priority, one task for the federal government, it's our national security and our military and our defense. We've got to make sure our entitlement programs are solved for future generations. What that means is, I do not advocate any changes for folks who are currently retired or near retirement, but folks like me and folks younger than me, we've got to make reforms to the system, but I need to stop in order to keep these programs solvent so we can keep our promise to the folks out here. Are we out of time?
You're out of time.
Yeah, we could talk for a few minutes about this, obviously.
That's why I extended it to 1 minute, and I know it's not enough to address this issue.
The most effective way to reduce our budget is to get our economy going full throttle. And if we get our economy going full throttle, we do that by reducing unreasonable regulations that are being imposed upon small businesses now. Revise their tax system, get rid of all their tax breaks to the special interest groups and all the other cronies that got their hands into the legislature's pockets, and then reduce the tax rate for everyone else. That will get more tax revenue coming in. So we do need to make tax cuts. We cannot cut the military any further than we already have. Well before that, the military is already guaranteed them more finances. We can eliminate the fraud and should eliminate the fraud, waste, and abuse in the Medicare and Medicaid systems. Over $100 billion per year are being wasted in those two programs alone. With respect to Social Security, the simple answer is this. When Social Security was first created, the life expectancy was a little under 20 years less than what it is now. We have to, after we get the grace period of people that are getting up to the stage, reduce the age, raise the age limit for people to collect Social Security. And that will reduce some of the Social Security costs.
Nevada has consistently the lowest ratings in education, something we have to address. We have an infrastructure that needs to be brought up to speed, not like other cities, but we have our problems. And we have had a deficit. In the last legislature, we did raise taxes, and that addressed some of that. I would like each of you to answer the question, what would you have done differently if you were in that legislature? And if you were already in the legislature, why you did what you did?
Well, I'm very proud of what we did in the last legislative session. As Senate Majority Leader, I supported Governor Brian Sandoval's agenda to invest in education, an investment that was long overdue. We combined it with world-class education reforms. The Wall Street Journal and other national publications said it was the most historic education reform of any state in the history of this country. And who do we raise taxes on? The largest 1% of businesses. Many of those out-of-state corporations were selling goods, many times Chinese goods, into this state and paying next to nothing into this state. We kept taxes low on small business. We kept the taxes low on property owners. And here's the important difference between Nevada and Washington. Even after last session, we are spending at 1992 state government spending levels. We have the 5th lowest business taxes in the country and the 7th lowest property taxes. And finally, we're working toward improving our education system, because if we want to truly diversify and make this the new Nevada, we have got to do better by education. I'm very proud of what I did. Thank you.
And any real conservative would have been extremely disappointed with what happened last legislative session. Before we should have raised any taxes, we should have made substantial cuts to the collective bargaining system, which would have reduced the cost of our public service employees. We should have made substantial changes to the PERS system, which would have reduced unfunded liabilities with the PERS system. Before we raised taxes, we should have eliminated prevailing wages for all public works projects, so they would save 20 to 30% of all public projects. Instead, this legislative session reduced the prevailing wages by 10% because they were threatened by the Democrats that they didn't put it back in, they were not going to vote for the largest tax increase in state's history. It's ridiculous. You cut spending if you can before you raise taxes. And the argument that you had to raise taxes $1.4 or $1.5 billion to help education is a fallacy. Only $600 million went to education. That's 40% of the tax increase. No one has addressed the other $800 or $900 million that was raised by that tax increase.
The next question is for Mr. Tartini, Mr. Matthews, Mr. Fierro, Mr. Call, and Mr. Bowers. And the question is, you have never been elected to public office on any level, city, county, or state. What qualifies you to represent the rest of District 3?
I need to respond to Mike Rover's last statement. Mike has a big problem with the truth, as you can tell. He promised not to raise taxes when he ran for office, lied, went back to raise taxes. He's campaigning for re-election, saying he promised 95.
And I asked you to do that at the end.
No, but you talked on his. I should have the right to.
But this was his question.
Okay, my question now, right?
Well, your question is...
No, he didn't talk about the tax deal, so I should have the right to respond to it now.
Let him speak, you guys.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. We'll continue that in the next question. What would I bring to the table that nobody else can bring to the table? What are most people frustrated with our current politicians? They say one thing when they get elected, they go back to whatever office and they don't represent what they say. You need somebody in there who's going to go back there and fight what they actually believe is in the best interest of the constituents. One thing people know about me is they know I'm a fighter, I'm determined, I persevere, they knock me to the ground, I'm going to come back stronger than ever. I will be your voice in Washington, D.C., your conservative voice, fighting for what's best for you, not the special interest groups.
Tourism is a primary lifeblood of Southern Nevada. It is connected at the hip with international travel and our visa regulations. How would you improve our tourism, keeping those issues in mind?
Thank you, Stan. And just really,
This is a 30-second.
okay, just really quickly, the new taxes were only between 600 and 700 million, so most of the money did go to education. Danny always gets that wrong. Half of the so-called tax increase of 1.4 million or billion was existing taxes that was already being spent on education and healthcare and other essential functions of the state government. Danny really needs to do his homework. I hope we get an NFL football team. I think that'd be great. We're going to need to expand the convention center. We've got to keep up with the Orlandos and Chicagos of the world. And the other thing we did this last session is we started to diversify our economy. Frankly, we started, well, I've got to stop here, but it's called the New Nevada, and Governor Sandoval's done a great job in the last 6 years diversifying our economy.
There are more than 15 million illegal immigrants in the U.S. and no recommendations from Congress on how to correct it. Although some say round them up, throw them all out, that's physically and logistically impossible. Others push for total amnesty, which is also a poor solution. It will not stop the flow. What do you see as a fiscally sound, logistically possible solution, Mr. Matthews first?
The beginning part of the immigration issue is real simple. I mean, it's a common sense approach, and I have a hard time even thinking the left would disagree with. We as a nation must have a secure border to protect our citizens here. We either have to build a wall, use what other technology is, defend the borders and protect those borders. We need to also have a better system attracting people who overstay their visas. 40% of all people here illegally are overstaying their visas. Why can't we, with today's technology, be able to track those people and make sure they leave when they're supposed to leave? The next thing you need to do is you need to eliminate the reasons for the benefits, the encouragement we give to people to come here illegally. And that includes finding businesses much more substantially who violate the E-Verify laws, where they have to verify whether someone in the country is actually here illegally, and make sure people come across the borders illegally, they're not getting jobs or other taxpayer benefits that are currently provided to them. The next thing we need to do is we need to change the laws about how when somebody comes across the border and they're detained, that we give them a ticket and say, hey, come back to court, 6 months from now and you can show up. That, and we need to take away all the funding from any sanctuary city and make them enforce our immigration laws.
Right now, because Congress is not active, we have de facto amnesty because nothing's being done about the folks that have come over. On a bipartisan basis, Congress has got to do its job, and the first thing it has to do is be concerned about national security, and that's why we have to build a wall. We have to strengthen our southern border. We do have to make sure that we reform our visa system, because there are a great number of people, and the majority of the people who are here illegally are here because of an overstayed visa. Those things have to be done first. What do you do about the folks here? We're not going to put 12 million people in trucks and deport them. We will deport the criminals, folks who have broken the law. But for the folks who are here, once we secure the border, and only after we secure the border, and we convince the American people, and the American people are convinced that the border is secure, then we've got to have those folks be at the back of the line. They've got to pay back taxes, a fine. They've got to show they can work. There's got to be a process toward some sort of legal status. But the first thing we have to do is protect our border.
Each of you talked a bit about waste, fraud, and abuse in state government on different levels, different areas. When I was working for a congressman as his chief of staff in D.C., there was one particular office of the Department of Agriculture that had 5 employees, and 3 of the 5 did nothing but inspect pizza. Pepperoni pizza only. We were both stunned and amazed by this and looked into what we could do. It's just hard enough to crack. There were other problems in waste, fraud, and abuse. The technology that's used by law enforcement, which resulted in some of 9/11. And that law enforcement still, within the federal level, doesn't communicate well with each other. So there's several different areas. How would you, as a member of Congress, start addressing this waste, fraud, and abuse and addressing the technology that's failing?
There's 2 major problems here. The first, most everybody's been addressing, and that's the size and the scope of our bureaucracies. Going much further than what our Constitution ever intended. We need to get our federal government going back and doing just the limited things that are specifically enumerated in our Constitution, and then doing those things great, and putting back into power the states' responsibilities and let the states do that, and the localities, let them do that without having all this federal government intervention. The second area, which is not as costly but more egregious, is all the crony capitalism that goes out there. You have all these politicians that get campaign donations from people, and then they give companies different types of tax breaks or grants. I mean, for example, how many don't remember Solyndra and the billions of dollars that were wasted because of the large campaign contribution that only gave to Obama? Or how about they were spending millions of dollars checking out what happened when the monkeys get a massage and how it affects them? Or the millions of dollars we spent testing mountain lions running on a treadmill and how that affects them. This is all crony capitalism and has no place in our government, not with your taxpayer dollars either.
You know, there was a time before Harry Reid took over the Senate effectively, even though he's not majority leader now, where Congress actually passed appropriations bills, sent them to the White House, and they were signed. And Congress had much more control over the spending process. What we've seen over the last few years is a failure of Congress to, at least House and Senate together, agree on appropriation bills and go through the regular order, the normal appropriation process, which is the Congress's constitutional role. Instead, what you see both houses doing is passing continuing resolutions. The problem with that is Congress has lost its ability to dig down and cull the waste that are in these programs. One of the things we need, and none of us could do anything about this, but in the Senate, they need filibuster reform. Because it's very hard to get 60 votes in either party, and frankly, except on major items like Supreme Court nominees, those sorts of things, it should be 51 votes. The other thing is real important, the overreaching executive branch regulatory structure. It costs businesses and individuals in this country $2 trillion a year. It's the executive branch that's run amok. Congress has got to take back its constitutional role. Sorry for the overtime.
Okay, we've discussed a little bit about the illegal immigration problem. But along the same lines, the administration is intent on allowing Syrian refugees into the U.S. Maybe as high as 85 to 100,000. The FBI and the Department of Homeland Security have both stated that current vetting process is not thorough enough and would not stop the dangerous people. Some put the current number for the state of Nevada at 600 to 650 designated for here. What is your position on this issue, and what would you do if elected?
One of the main responsibilities of the federal government is to protect the citizens. and the safety of the citizens, if you can't fully vet people coming into our country, and it has been happening in the past in Europe, where people that pretended to be refugees came in and committed atrocious acts in Europe, why would anybody think it's okay to bring them into the United States? Until we can fully vet them and make sure they're not a danger, we as legislators representing you have to say no to that.
National security is priority number one. Until we can be assured that these folks can be vetted so that we make sure they're not here for unlawful means, you can't let them in. It's as simple as that.
Committee assignments are all critical within the congressional body, but they're based on seniority. They're also based on how you work with the leadership in office. What particular committees would each of you be after should you be elected?
I would go on the finance committee. I think the banking committee. I think one of the most important things facing our country now is what's happening to the value of our dollar and how the abuse is being done with the printing of our dollars. I have a finance background in college. I've dealt with banks in my real estate profession. There need to be substantial changes, and I hope to be put on that committee.
Financial services, because it's a very important issue to our housing market here in Southern Nevada. Also judiciary. I have a legal background. I'm a business attorney. A lot of issues of interest to me and frankly to Southern Nevada. Gaming issues are dealt with on judiciary. Thank you.
Over the next 3 to 4 weeks, you're going to see a lot of paid media done, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you're going to see some incredibly outlandish statements. And you're going to have to decide what you believe and what don't you want to believe. The credibility of each candidate is going to be very important. Now, what you heard Mr. Roberson say today was he questioned my credibility because I said the tax increase in the 2015 legislative session was $1.4 to $1.5 billion. Mr. Roberson, on the other hand, said the tax increase was $600 million or $700 million and basically called me a liar. I ask each and every one of you, go back to your computers, phones, whatever, Google the 2015 tax increase and see who's telling the truth. Then when you see these outlandish statements being spent by one candidate that you say, gosh, how could this possibly be true? Remember, he wasn't true here in this debate, and you understand this is the same person who wasn't true when he first ran for office. Look, and I'm running for Congress because I love this country, and I love this community. I've lived here for over 35 years. My family and I have done a lot of things to try to make this a better community. I'm as upset as most of all of you of what's happening in this community, in this country. We're tired of the same politicians who promise one thing, they go back to office, and they do exactly the opposite thing. What you're going to get from me, you're going to get somebody who's going to go back to Washington, D.C. and fight for what I'm telling you and campaigning on and running on. You're going to get me to go back there and be your voice, your constitutional conservative voice, who's going to fight for you. And if I get knocked down like all of us will do as a freshman legislator, I'm going to get back up like I have after every campaign defeat and fight even harder. I will persevere, I'll be committed, and I will get things done before it's all over done. You don't beat a Tarkanian down and come back stronger than ever. Thank you.
Well, Danny seems to have a comprehension problem. The issue at stake was how much of the tax increase was spent on education. He says $600 million out of 1.4, 1.5 billion. I say the $600 million of the taxes that were new were spent on education, in addition to the education money we spent on existing taxes. So you might want to frame the question accurately. I'm running for this seat. I'm sorry? Yeah, great. Okay, good. I'm the most accomplished conservative in this race. There's only 2 people on this stage who've ever been elected to anything. I was elected in 2010. I beat a liberal and kind of a Democrat. In 2012, I became Senate Republican leader. In 2014, Senate Majority Leader. And I supported Governor Sandoval's agenda. I think it was a wonderful agenda. I sponsored and passed the most comprehensive collective bargaining reform in the history of this state. I sponsored and passed the most significant PERS reform in the history of this state. I passed and sponsored 6 different tort reform bills. We collectively passed the most significant education reform in the history of this country. My first session, we cut more out of state government spending than any state in this country. Any state on a percentage basis. We're at 1992 spending levels. 5th lowest business taxes in the country. 7th lowest property taxes. Look at every Republican governor who ran for president. Almost all of them have Republican legislators, yet all their states have higher taxes than ours. I have a higher rating with the American Conservative Union than even Joe had, who's the current holder of this office. So So I'm very proud of my accomplished record. I want to be part of the governing wing of the Republican Party to actually get things done. It's easy to talk about what you want to do, what you're going to do, but ultimately government is about getting things done. I've proven I can do that. I'm asking for your support. Thank you.